And welcome to another live broadcast. Again, we are across the three platforms of Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. Obviously, starting out as a LinkedIn show, it's nice to migrate over there. So if you're listening wherever you are, please come and say hi, and we can find out where everyone is. So brilliant week this week. We have Robin Sachs, who is such a wonderful person. We've had some fantastic conversations. But Robin, if you want to give yourself a quick introduction.
All right, so quick introduction. I'll give it a shot. Greg. Quick. Basically, I'm a public speaking coach and a confidence coach. I'm also a speaker and a writer, and I have spent a number of years helping people just learn to be more confident and less stressed, not just around communications and speaking, but in everyday life, because being a little more confident and a little less stressed is something that pretty much we're all looking for at any given time, and they do go hand in hand. And the thing that I always am passionate about making sure people know is something like confidence and something like stress management. Those are skills, and like any other skill, they can be learned, and they're often things where little tiny shifts can really have a big impact for you. So that's me in a nutshell, Greg.
Brilliant. Yeah, no, I agree. Confidence is something that I want to kind of get into conversation with. But you're right, they are, and I think people don't realise that they are learned skills. That people think people are naturally confident or they're not, and then of course a lot is put around whether you're introverted or extroverted, and certainly talking to introverts, they believe that extroverts are more confident than they are. And it's a really interesting one. It's not true. I'm believe it or not quite introverted. I would class myself as an ambivert, but on the introverted side, if that makes sense. So maybe 60% introverted, 40% extroverted, maybe. And it's not true. I think introverts have the ability to be more confident because they're not looking for the external validation that extroverts can seek at times.
Yeah, and with what you just said, Greg, excuse me, it's funny because we love labels, right? In our societies, we love labels, and it's almost like we feel this constant need to grab labels and stick them on ourselves and like walk around with them every day. I'm an extrovert, I'm an introvert, and those are two examples, but there are so many. And the challenge with that is kind of to your point is we look at that label and we put it in this little box and go, well, this is me or not me. And then I'm going to not excuses necessarily, but I'm going to give reasons based on what little thing is in this box here as to why I'm good or not good at something. And like you just said, as somebody who works a lot with helping people get more confident and less stressed when they're doing public speaking, for example, it's something that most people are not comfortable with. And what I've found over the years is introverts, once they get kind of some little skill sets that are, a lot of them are mindset shifts, what happens is introverts are often the best public speakers because they're coming from the inside. They're bringing something to the table that extroverts can't always do, or that they're challenged to do. Because like you said, extroverts are all about what's happening outside of them and bringing that in. Introverts bring from the inside out. And so one of the things that I would certainly say, be hyper aware in your life of, what labels are you putting on yourself? And please don't think that means you can or can't do something, because can and can't have to do with skill sets, not things like introversion or extroversion. And there are ways that, for this example, an introvert can be an amazing, for example, speaker or conversationalist. There are ways that extroverts can be an awful speaker or conversationalist. So it goes back to the skills, not always just the personality traits.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. I think another thing as well is if we label ourselves as say as an extrovert. Seems like I'm picking on extroverts being an introvert, but we'll pick on extroverts a little bit. But it's almost saying I'm an extrovert, but I've been quiet, or I don't actually feel like socializing. And then you're not then living up to the expectations. And then that puts pressure on you because you feel that as an extrovert, you must be the social, social messiah, should we say? And it gets a bit, and you're right with labels. Actually, I didn't know that I was on the introverted side until I did Myers-Briggs test. That was actually for a job interview because they were looking at personality types and trying to balance out the team, which I thought, it's a really useful thing to do. And then I found out I was kind of on the introversion side. And then, so I kind of found out who else was introverted, and it really surprised me. So Henry Ford apparently had the same personality traits that I do. And so there are pluses and negatives. But no, it's interesting you should talk about public speaking. And I remember it still sticks in me because I learned a very, very strong lesson the first time I actually spoke in public. And of course, being introverted, you say, and I stood up in a room and then I started speaking. And then a few minutes in, I realized that the room was silent. And of course, I started to internally panic. They're not interested. They're not engaging. They're not. So I carried on, as I do. And I carried on. And then I kind of realized people were quiet because they were listening. It's not that they weren't paying attention. They were paying a lot of attention to it. And it is funny because we do have those feelings sometimes that, and I get it when I'm on camera myself and it's just me. I still kind of get the same feelings. So and again, whether that's lack of confidence or just being slightly uncomfortable because there's no feedback. Is that down to confidence? That's a good question for you.
Yeah, so let's talk about that because, boy, what you just described, Greg, is so common, right? I'm guessing that pretty much almost every single person, and the ones that say they've never felt that before are lying. So let's just get that out of the way. Everybody feels that way at times. And let's take what you just described, because this is one of the foundational components, interestingly enough, of both confidence and stress. And that has to do with self-talk. Self-talk is where everything starts and everything ends. Whether it's confidence, it's stress, it doesn't matter which end of the the spectrum we're on there. Everything starts and stops with what's going on up here. And oftentimes it's interesting to think about, let's take it from a stress standpoint. So much of our stress is created by us. Because what's happening is that we're not actually just dealing with what's coming at us. We're dealing with how we're choosing to respond or react to what's coming at us. And you gave a perfect example. As soon as there's a situation that we're questioning or doubting or looking for an answer to, that's interesting, nobody's talking. Our brains don't like that incomplete puzzle, and so it jumps into trying to solve it. And where our brains tend to go is to the negative. What's wrong? What's going wrong? Do they like me? I bet I'm boring. They're not even interested in this. Are they even understanding what I'm talking about? And it starts this little spiral, right? You have one of those thoughts. And if you have one, you're going to have three. If you have three, you're going to have five. And it's going to go on and on. So that self-talk has the same effect on confidence. And the way that works is, if we know that our self-talk and our instant reactive thoughts are often going to be the negative, and we can talk about why that happens, because there's a reason that we do that. It's not that it's a bad thing or we're negative people. So we can talk about that in a sec. But the same thing applies to confidence. When I'm in my head being a supporter of myself instead of a critic, when I'm being my own coach, or I'm talking to myself like I would talk to a friend instead of being a bully to myself, confidence instantly goes up. Stress instantly comes down. When I'm talking to myself in a way that stress is going up, confidence is coming down. So this is this little thing here that this symbiotic relationship. But the reason we bend negative with our thoughts kind of goes back to caveman days. We've done this forever. And when humans first came into existence, the thing was you had to be on alert constantly because an animal is going to eat you, right? Something's going to happen. You're not going to survive. And so there was this, where's the danger? What's wrong? And we were constantly in that mode. And thank goodness we still have that mode today, because if there's a true threat to our safety, for example, we want that fight or flight response, those things kicking in quickly so we can take action, we can fight, we can run, we can do what we need to do to survive. Part of the challenge today is we kick that response into our own bodies and brains on a regular basis because we're looking for the negative or what's going wrong with things that either aren't going wrong. So it's almost like we're creating things before they happen with worry, right? We're getting anxious about something because I'm looking at the future, what could happen. That's what worry is all about. That's what anxiety is about, going out into the future, right? So if we're living out there, we're telling ourselves stories about what could happen. And if we're telling ourselves only the negative stories, the stress is going to go through the roof. But if we flip it and we not only tell ourselves what could go wrong, but also what could go right, because there's an equal chance both are going to happen. If we're only giving ourselves one side of the story, we're going to keep ourselves in a pretty stressed state and worry and be overwhelmed and all those, those feelings that come along with that. But if I tell myself what could go wrong, but then remind myself, but here's also what could happen, the other side of this is, if it does work, we can now go do this. It balances those two things out. And that's why we call it stress management, not stress elimination, because the goal isn't to get rid of the stress, because it can be helpful sometimes to know what could go wrong. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. The problem is getting stuck there. But when my stress is up here and I can say, let me also look at the other side of the story. If it does work, that brings our stress levels down. And now they're in a much more manageable place. And anytime I can manage my stress, my confidence is going to go up because I just gave myself somewhere to go other than, oh no. And that's really the goal of it all.
You've just actually driven a thought that I've never thought about, talking about the caveman instinct of flight or fight. Now, I wonder whether you'd be able to answer this or not. I don't know, but I wonder whether that's so deeply inherent within us. Our modern lives don't fulfill the need for it. So therefore we seek it because it's not being fulfilled within us. So you know how some people will describe themselves as being self-destructive, or they'll always be looking for that good thing to go wrong because that's how their life's always been, which we know that if you look for the things to go wrong, you will end up creating them. So I just wonder whether there's that fight or flight within us that isn't being fulfilled. And some people have it as a stronger urge to look for it.
That's interesting, Greg. Interesting. And it's, of course, there are times when there are some clinical things going on. And that's, of course, not what we're talking about here. We're talking about the everyday type of things that we go through. Taking the clinical things out of the mix and really thinking about the day to day. You said a word that hit me as soon as you said it. It said seeking. Are they seeking that? And this is kind of interesting as you're talking, and I'm just thinking about it because it's a fascinating thing to think about. We all are seeking things all the time for within us, right? Whether if we're really stressed or anxious, we're often seeking calm, right? If maybe in some instances, if things aren't as exciting and are too calm, sometimes we are seeking adventure, right? Or seeking excitement, and that can take us in a completely different direction. And if we think of that word seeking, and everyone, everyone listening right now can take a moment and think about this. If you just sat back and took a couple of breaths and you asked yourself the question, what am I seeking in my life? we'd have a whole bunch of different answers. But I think the key with this is you've got to be clear on what you're seeking personally and why. And because that's going to tell you what actions to take, or that's going to tell you what to do, or even what not to do. Because we have things in our lives these days that we're just on autopilot with, and we're doing them every day, every week, every month, to the point we don't even realize that it's counterintuitive or counterproductive to what we're actually seeking. But it's just a default, so we're stopping ourselves or getting in our own way. And you and I were talking a little bit before we went on about this idea of, just with where we are right now, life is busy in general, and you put the pandemic on top of it, and you put so many different things on top of that. And, it's like we have these to-do lists, and to-do lists never end, because even when you cross a bunch of stuff off, you keep adding to it. So they never are ending, which is the problem with to-do lists. That's a totally different story.
I always feel I'm winning if I cross more off than I add.
Exactly. That's
my measurement of winning. I know they're never going to end. I know it's never going to end.
Right. But, we were talking about this idea of, it might be helpful for you in your life to also create what we were calling a to-don't list. And what that means is really kind of take an inventory of your day-to-day habits and actions and thoughts, even, and beliefs and stuff, and really start to pay attention to what are things that you're saying or thinking or doing that are just autopilot for you, that are stopping you from doing what you're seeking, or getting in the way of it, making it harder, making it, it's pushing it out farther for you to get to it as a goal or whatever it might be. You don't have to keep doing what you've always done and add to it. That gets overwhelming. Anytime you're going to add new things to your life that you want to do or need to do, take a look at the things you don't want or need to do anymore and get them out, so that you're always in this space of not being overwhelmed because I'm just adding without subtracting all the time. So something to think about that might be a handy exercise to do for everybody.
Yeah. As we were saying that, during the lockdowns and certainly in the US and the UK, so many places had shut. So we were forced to remove things from our lives. Mm-hmm. We had no choice. It wasn't a, oh, well, I'm not going out to get that takeaway coffee. You had no choice. You couldn't do it. And yeah, I went through a very similar exercise. I actually sat down and said, if I started now, and other than family and work, what would I put back in? And what scared me was, I said, the gym. That was it. Seriously, that was it. And the gym is just because of physical health. Mm-hmm. That was the only thing I would add back in.
Isn't that amazing?
That's not to say I wouldn't add in that takeaway coffee or eating out, but I didn't need to. My life didn't drastically change because I wasn't doing these things.
Other than there was a lot more money in the bank account. That's the one thing that
money. We were discussing that as well, and I said I felt quite ashamed of how much money I had left at the end of each month, and not being an extravagant person. But yeah, I did do that exercise, and I said, what actually? I'm going to sit here for 3 months or 6 months, however many months we were locked down, and I said, if it opens up again, what have I actually really missed doing? And it was the gym. As we said before, that I kind of realized these things that I was taking for granted, I wasn't appreciating. So now I do. So I now go and get takeaway coffee, but I don't get a takeaway anymore. I will go and I'll take my laptop and I'll sit in there and I will make use of that time, because actually it's not the coffee I'm going for. It's the change of scenery, the change of environment.
Yeah, and Greg, you just hit on something else important. Once you think about what you're seeking, make sure it's actually what you're seeking, because it's interesting to stop and think about it, using your example. it's not just the coffee I'm looking for, because I could sit at home, I could go to the grocery store, buy a big bag of coffee and make my coffee every day. I don't need to go out and get it. What am I seeking? I might be seeking the coffee, right? Because I love a specific kind of coffee at a specific place. Sure. But oftentimes, maybe it's the interaction I'm seeking, or just that feel of the environment of sitting in the corner of a Starbucks or wherever it might be. And it's just that feel that puts me in a certain mode or mood or work, focus or something like that.
Yeah.
So, really get clear on what you're seeking. And I love that you brought in, and this sounds so ridiculous, but it's absolutely the truth. Sometimes it takes something, a whirlwind like a pandemic, where we have no options, to really sit down and think about this stuff, because in our day-to-day lives, we're just going and going and going and going. And we believe that everything we're doing is what we need to be doing. And it's not actually, often far from the truth. What we're doing is just habit. And if we don't stop occasionally and check our habits, we can run into that. I'm feeling overwhelmed because now I'm only adding, I'm not subtracting. Or I'm seeking things that actually are false seeking. It's not bringing me the result that I want or the feeling that I want. And that's confusing to me, because I should, right? We use words like that. I should, other people do that. I should feel better by doing this, but I don't. Maybe that's not the thing you're actually seeking for you. So sitting back and just getting some clarity on that stuff, and it doesn't take a long time to do. Coming up to the new year, this is a perfect time to think about some of this stuff, because so many people are thinking about, altering habits or doing something new or different, or what am I going to do next year? What are my goals? Those types of things. So we're doing a little bit of forward thinking and a little bit of self-reflection right now, just naturally for so many people. And if you take some time to just get clarity on, what am I not going to do anymore, instead of just what am I gonna do, that
Yeah.
can take some weight off really quickly.
Yeah, it is very much, and it does kind of fall into the seeking. So I've coached people in the past, and they say, well, I want to bring this into my life, or I'm not doing. And I use a gym example. So it's I want to get fit. I want to, I'm not going to the gym as much as I should do. I feel like I'm beating myself up, and when we kind of get down to it, it isn't the gym that they're after. It's not the wellness. It's actually just that hour, 3 times a week. And that is what they're seeking, just to say, I can switch off for 3 times a week. And then what happens is I say, well, okay, what else do you enjoy? Oh, I enjoy reading. I enjoy going for a walk. I enjoy whatever it is. And I said, well, take that hour and do one of those things. And then I get people come back, go, I've never been at the gym so much in my life as I have now. Because what they're seeking is the break. So as long as they get the break, they're happy. They just happen to be filling it with the gym rather than thinking that they need to go to the gym. It is really strange. But yeah, no, this not to do list. It's not. And again, this kind of, certainly falls into my space a little bit, with development of habits, development of character, development of the traits that you want. And people seem to accept that they are who they are. Well, I'm this type of person, and what we're going back to labels, and certainly, with development, because I don't deal so much with learn new skills. Mine is more about the development aspect and what you actually want of the skills that you've got. But people do believe that they are who they are. If you talk to someone who knew me 20 years ago, they'd be like, you're not who I went to school with. You're not who I knew. The biggest compliment that I ever get, and people don't mean it as a compliment, but I take it as a compliment, is when they say, you've changed. And I go, Thank you. And they go, no, you're not the person I knew, or you're not the person I thought you were, and you've changed. And I go, thank you. That's a lovely compliment. It's really interesting, but yeah, to work on that not to do so, that can even be taken down into habits, that can be taken down into reactions, it can be taken down into kind of that emotional level, the way that we view the world. It's not just a physical not to do list. So it's like, I'm going to not go and get that coffee 3 times a week, I'm not going to watch TV for an hour at night, I'm not, these physical things, for me, the things that stick, they need to go deeper than that and say why. Like TV's a really interesting one. So a lot of people talk about procrastination. Oh, I end up watching films all night. Oh, I end up doing that. I do that, but it's a conscious decision to do it, because what I am seeking, what I need is that hour. So I can fill that hour with anything, but at the moment, I'm just putting a film on or watching a box set. But it's a conscious decision to do that.
Yeah.
And this is what's really interesting. I actually have 3 lists. I have a not to do list, a to do list, and a want to do list.
Love it.
And my want to do list of all the things that bring me pleasure, and I do tick some off, but they're not needed. But they're not things I want to stop. So they kind of sit in that middle part.
Yeah.
Which works really well for me.
Yeah, I do a similar thing. Is I am not a fan of to-do lists for the reason that, like we've been talking about, they're not ending. They do not end, because we have basically a list and we continue to add to it. And so there's never a feeling of accomplishment with a to-do list for me. And a lot of people, I think they might have just heard that and went, oh my goodness, I never thought about it that way. It literally doesn't end. So there's no closure, there's no conclusion, there's no end ever. So I became a big fan a few years ago, after somebody mentioned they did this, and I went, oh, that's so brilliant. I don't make to-do lists. Everything I have to do simply goes somewhere on my calendar. And that leads into your intention, right? The idea is, if you're not being intentional and making a conscious choice to do something or not do something, you're on autopilot. And the problem with that, and I won't call it a challenge, I'll call it a problem, because it's something that impacts your life greatly, not in a good way usually. The problem with that is, anytime you're on autopilot, you take choice out of the mix. And choice is your superpower. Choice is the thing that makes humans amazing, that you can at any given moment make a decision and go take action. You can do that with anything. And so if you're on autopilot, we've taken that choice out of the mix. And we've just whatever. And that's when we start to feel like life's happening to us, because we're really not participating. We're just going with the flow, so to speak. The moment we start being conscious and deliberate and intentional, and owning the fact that, I need to step away and do something that makes me feel better, or clears my head, or just makes me laugh, or whatever it is, that is something you better be doing every day. Even if it's for 2 minutes a day, you better be finding that time for yourself, or you're going to get burned out at some point, because our brains and bodies need that little bit of joy of doing something that makes you feel good, makes you, tune out a little bit, and that's okay. And so I love that idea of just that list of, a similar thing I have a tiny list that's the same every single day, and it's got 10 things on it. And every day it's the same. I erase the check marks the next day, and it's the same list. So it's not a to-do list, it's an action list. And there are 10 things I have to do for me every day. And there are things like, exercise or get moving, right? Eat a fruit, eat a vegetable, post something on LinkedIn, write something, because a lot of what I do is either writing programs or writing a course or writing articles and things like that. Meditate, right? Duolingo, I'm learning French, something that came out of the pandemic. I've started learning French last March, and I haven't missed a day since then.
I'm only laughing because I've started learning Spanish, so I'm with you on that one.
So here's how you win with those things. The key is all of those things on that list are in alignment with things I want to accomplish, whether for my business, whether for my health, whether for my mental well-being. Here's how to succeed in doing that. Because you might think, well, 10 things a day. All right, now you've already loaded a day with a bunch of things. No, no, no. I have very, very low expectations on each of those things. So, for example, when I say writing, I might sit down and write an article. I might sit down and write a chapter to a book. What I hold myself accountable for every day is I have to write 2 sentences. Because if I do that, the thing is, I can't not do that. I can literally take 30 seconds out of my day and check that off the list. But by doing that consistently, there are days, if I write 2 sentences, I'm going to write a paragraph. It's just how life works, right? As far as exercise, some days I might take an hour and do a class or go out for a 30-minute walk, right? Or a 2-hour whatever, What I hold myself accountable is I have to do 1 minute of activity every day. And what that means is at the end of the day, if I haven't done exercise or movement for the day, I am accountable for 1 minute. So I can't not do that. That's 50 jumping jacks. That's a 1-minute plank. So the idea with that stuff is set yourself up for success 100% of the time. If you make it so tiny that you can't not do it, what you start to learn quickly is one, oftentimes you're going to do much more than that. So you're ahead of the game always. And that makes you feel proud and like you did accomplish a lot. And two, even if you did a 1-minute plank and that's all you did for the next 30 days, you did nothing else. In 30 days, do you realize how much stronger you are than you were 30 days ago? And we don't really think about how those little tiny things done consistently are exactly what get you to the big things. It's not sitting down and making you do big things because human beings aren't going to do that. It's not sustainable. It's overwhelming. And I don't have the time for it and the energy. And that's the truth. But you don't have to do that. The key is little things consistently have a huge impact.
Yeah, it's the compound effect.
Yep.
Or yeah, not so much a ripple effect. I always, in my head, it's always kind of like a ripple effect that the small gets bigger and bigger. But yeah, the compound effect. And, we certainly, when, hear people talking about investments and compound investments and, but we don't take that theory into our lives because you can see your money growing in the bank from your compound interest, but you don't always look inside to realize that the growth that's happening. And this again goes back to the compliment of you've changed. I've changed that much. Someone's noticed. Yeah. And that is fantastic. But sorry, what you were talking about, set yourself up for success. I really like that because that actually then leads into confidence.
100%. And
rather than set yourself up for failure, which a lot of people do because they set big things. Oh, I must post on LinkedIn 7 days a week. I must write this. I must spend an hour doing this. I must do that. I must do that. I want to pop a comment up by Maya in a minute. But to me, if you set yourself up for success, to write 2 lines, to do a minute exercise, to whatever that is, something that then breeds. And I guess that once you start breeding that success, that actually those little things can become slightly bigger because you've got the confidence that you're going to succeed in them.
Yeah. And when you talk about confidence, here's a thing I think oftentimes confidence gets thought about, in my opinion, completely the wrong way. When we say confidence, and if you think about, what is confidence? Because we know it when we see it, we know it when we hear it, we know it when we feel it, but rarely do we stop to go, well, what is it? Because if you don't know what something's comprised of, you can't possibly get it because you don't know what to do to get it or what not to do. So to me, what confidence is all about, it is not being in control of the situation or the room. It is not being in control of other people, because good luck with all of those things, right? 100% confidence is all about being in control of you. And that has to do with a lot of what we're talking about. What I'm choosing to do, what I'm not choosing to do, what I'm thinking, what I'm believing. Our beliefs are only our beliefs because we've chosen to believe them. You're allowed to change when you have new information. I hope you change what you think or believe or what your opinions are. That's what intelligent people do, right? When you have new information, you don't beat yourself up about being wrong. You go, oh, that changes it. I didn't know that before. So it makes sense why I thought this here. Now it makes sense why I thought this here. It's not that I'm wishy-washy. It's that I'm being smart. And when I have new information, I can change my thoughts, my behaviors, my beliefs, whatever it might be. And so we choose all of it. And to your point, you've said this, a couple of different ways, Greg. We are in total control of what we choose to think, what we choose to believe, what we choose to do, what we choose not to do. And that choice is what makes us, again, so incredibly powerful. It's not that you're going back. Who can't look back and say I've changed? Thank goodness, right? If you say I can't change, I am who I am, I'm going to challenge you to look backwards over the last 10, 20, 30, 40 years and tell me again you haven't changed as a human being.
Yeah.
No, your experiences have changed you. They have. You might not realize that. Everything you've ever gone through, you handle things differently than you did 10 years ago because you've gone through them, or you understand them, or you have more knowledge or information or experience. The challenge again is, what we do as humans is other people look at us and see how far we've come. We often look out into the future and go, look how far I still have to go.
Mhm.
And that can be paralyzing, because it's like the to-do list, it never ends. If all we're doing is looking out going, I still have to do this and this and this, and I'm not there yet. That's overwhelming. You just completely shut yourself down from success. But if you go, wow, I have a lot to learn still, but let's give ourselves the other side of the story again. However, let me look back. Look how far I've come. Holy cow. You've got to look at both sides, or
Yeah.
you're going to get yourself you're going to get yourself stuck. And we actually just say that, right? I'm stuck. I don't know what to do next.
Yeah.
That's because you're only looking one way. You're not looking the other way.
Yeah, it's funny actually, because I actually put a poll up on LinkedIn yesterday, and it's a conversation I've been having for a few days now, of whether time is finite or infinite. And we obviously know we've got 24 hours in a day. We've got 7 days in a week. We've got 28 to 31 days. We know there's 365 days in a year. We know. So in one way, it's finite that way. But then I personally look at time as being infinite.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, it's the thought that I don't have to get to where I'm going because there's no time limit on it.
Right.
I will run out of time before I get to where I want to get to.
Mm-hmm.
But if I think that actually I've only got this long, I'm mid 40s now, so I don't want to put any jinx on it. Say I've got 40 years left. Where do I want to get to in 40 years? I will start panicking and say, well, actually, I've only got 40 years left, which is what you're talking about. Now, in my mind, because time is infinite, I've got as long as I want to get to where I want to get to, and accept that likelihood I won't get there.
And using,
there's this thing as well that this year I've dropped goals. I don't have goals set. And actually I talked on a live stream 2 weeks ago about this, and about having a destination rather than a goal. Because I always challenge people with goals of, once you've reached your goal, where do you go now? I was victim of this a few years ago. I ran my first ultra marathon, so 53.6 miles. It was something that I'd always wanted to do. I finished. I was tired. My feet hurt. Let's not get into that. There's a world of pain. But I sat there at the end and just went, what now? I've done this. Where do I go now? And that was kind of when I started to learn to drop goals. And it's really interesting. So something when we talk about choice and confidence and things. So, I coach people on the fact that an event. So let's go back to the analogy of standing on stage to speak. Isn't a negative or a positive. It's just an event. It's us that puts that negative and positive on. So when we go back to the choices, you can choose to put positive or you can choose to put a negative on.
And that will determine your outcome. Not only will that determine that will determine how you feel the entire time you're doing it. And it goes back to that, everything is starting here because every single thing we do as humans, if you think about it, starts with a thought. That thought creates a feeling, and that feeling creates a behavior. We're just machines that way, right? It's just like a machine, garbage in, garbage out. You put good stuff in, you're going to get good stuff out. It's literally that simple. And yes, there's a ton of nuances and a ton of logistics and yes. However, you don't need to know any of that. What you need to know at the very simplest of explanations is what you think is going to determine what your output or your outcome is. And when you know that, again, realizing and embracing that I've got the power to make some shifts and get completely different outcomes. And I'll use, an example of someone doesn't like public speaking, right? Very common. But now they've been asked to get up and speak, or they have to lead their team, or they've been asked to do something, whatever, could you come talk to this group? They say yes. And now we're freaking out, right? And the idea is this. What's often happening is that person is probably in their head and they're repeating a lot of things over and over and over, like, oh, I hate public speaking. I get so nervous. I don't do it well. And it's all this negative stuff, right? What if I forget what I'm going to say? What if I look like a fool up there? What if right? What if? And it's all negative what ifs that we come up with. Right? It's the caveman thing. What animal's going to eat me the second I step up on stage? Because there's no other outcome, no other possibility, right? I'm going to get eaten by an animal in front of everyone is where we go in our heads. And the moment, again, we sit back and go, okay, let's take those thoughts. You're allowed to keep all of those thoughts. I don't care if you keep telling yourself, I'm going to get up there and get eaten by an animal. Because we can first talk about, is that actually ever going to happen? No. Okay, so remind yourself that's pretty extreme. Right? That right there can bring stress down at least a notch, that what I'm thinking is totally irrational. The other side of it is, let's make some shifts in your head. One, let's throw the word presentation out. Please throw the word presentation out of your vocabulary forever. Nothing is a presentation. Everything is a conversation. And guess what? You have those all day long, don't you? So what you're doing is not presenting. You're getting up and sharing something you know. That's all you're doing. Just like if you were sitting at coffee and somebody came up and said, hey, can you explain to me what you're doing? And you'd go, oh, yeah. And you just talk. You're allowed to do that. That's what that is. Great presenters are just having conversations. If you notice, that's something that makes great presenters really good. Doesn't feel like they're presenting because they're not. Another shift could be reminding yourself that it's not about you. When you're communicating, it's never about you. It's about your audience. How can you help them? What do they need? How can you make their lives better, their jobs easier? Why are they sitting there? They're not wasting their time coming here for an hour after they drove here, sitting here listening to you and then driving back home. They're not taking that time out of their life unless they see a value to it. There's something you might be able to tell them. That's what they're looking for. They could care less what your hair looks like today. They could care less if you're nervous or not. They could care less what's happening with you. They're there for them. So starting to shift some of this and just even coming up with mantras and reminding yourself when your stress level starts going up, this isn't about me. What can I share with them right now? Automatically brings those stress levels down and gets them in manageable places. So everything starts and ends here,
Yeah.
whether it's stress or confidence.
Yeah. One of the things that I occasionally say to people when they're in this and looking for that kind of confidence is, somebody has asked you to do this because they think you are capable of doing it. No one's going to ask you, or they know. Yeah. And you know, that's kind of, you might self-doubt, but there's somebody else that says, no, you're capable. If you're going to lead a presentation for a team, that person that's asked you isn't asking you to stand there and fail.
Right.
Because they're taking their team out, they're taking the time out, as you were saying, to sit there to get some value, to learn something, or whatever that reason is. They're not going to set you up to fail, because then they're wasting 10, 12 people's time. And it's having that confidence that somebody else knows that you're capable of delivering this.
Yeah. And another
about conversation as well is very important. And I think that sometimes, you know, when I record videos, and I hope I'm not alone in this, that when I record videos or I do live streams on my own, I sometimes have a picture of a person right where you are now, because I'm then having a conversation with you. And I really hope I'm not the only person that does this, because I'll seem a little bit mad. But it doesn't mean that I would ever stop it, because it helps me.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's what it is. And you're right, it is conversations. And I think, you know, we can all go away and we can go and watch the news, or go and watch something where someone is presenting, and yes, they're having their conversations. They're informing you through conversation of something that's happening. Yeah. And I think that's really that's such a good tip is to remember that we are actually having those conversations.
And sometimes people might say, yeah, but if I'm presenting, I have a script. So my first thing, and this is a totally different discussion for a different day, but why do you have a script? Please don't memorize a script. And by the way, if you did, nobody in the audience knows your script, do they? So if you forget something, they have no idea. If you mess up, they don't know. They only know if you go, oh my goodness, wait, I forgot this, or I messed up. It's okay to just take a breath and move on to the next thing. They have no idea. It's amazing. You don't realize how often when you're watching someone, when you're in the audience, how different that thing might be than what they've practiced. Because you don't know what they're going to say. So if they don't say it, you don't know they missed it. So it doesn't matter. Just keep going. If it's important, it'll come back up. Someone will ask a question, or you can send an email after and go, here's another thing I thought of that might be helpful for you. And then you look like an expert.
Yeah. So, I had to give a presentation a few years ago, and I fell for this. I scripted it. I scripted my presentation, and I learned it off by heart for weeks and weeks and weeks. And then I was just heading out the door to deliver this presentation, and I've got about an hour before I had to leave. And the presentation was about 35, 40 minutes long. So I thought, I'll go and get myself a cup of coffee, and then I'll run through it. Blank. Completely blank. I could not think of anything because I was trying to recite the words.
Yeah.
So what I did, I went, I know what I'm talking about. I'm going to write down the 6 prompts that I want. And that is all I took with me.
Yeah.
And everyone said that was a fantastic presentation. Because I had my prompts, I knew what I was saying and delivered it.
It's exactly right. Because your brain doesn't need sentences. Our
No,
brains need triggers because we know our stuff. It's a matter of what was I going to say next? What was I going to share next? What was I going to talk about or explain next? That's all we need. So you spot on.
yeah,
And you can only be conversational when you do that because you're not on a script. You're
yeah.
just sharing.
And it actually removed that doubt, that fear that I was going to forget something or I was going to forget a line. So I had more confidence to deliver that presentation because other than these 6 prompt points, I was going to say whatever was in my mind that day. And this is really, really interesting. I just want to go back to something. In fact, can we? Sorry, Mario actually popped up a comment when we were talking that you said instead of listing it, schedule it. I kind of want to make a point about this because there's a difference between scheduling and time blocking. And I just kind of want to get this over to people that aren't listening because what you said was really interesting. So you're going to write, but it's a minimum of 2 sentences. You're going to do a 1-minute plank. I will hold you to that. And so your scheduling is right at this. I'm going to get these in. Now I want to kind of be clear that we're not time blocking things. So you're not scheduling time blocking an hour for writing, and then you only do 2 sentences within that hour. It might be if you were editing your book or you were trying to add point or whatever, but and I just kind of want to make it clear that time blocking is something that I do for, I think it's 5 hours a day. I have time blocks. The rest of the time is open. It's playtime. But yeah, I just kind of want to make clear that when we talk about scheduling instead of listing, we're not talking about time block. Because I think that time blocking, it's really useful at the right points and the right moments. But I've known people that say I can't time block. And I go, well, why can't you time block? Oh, because I'm trying to put 10 minutes in here and 2 minutes there and 7 minutes there. And I'm spending so long trying to get these bits in because I will forget what I need to be doing. And it becomes so obsessive to time block that it's not helpful. Like I say, I go, I don't want to say that I do because of working globally that I can be working till 1 or 2 a.m. or 6, 7 a.m. start. So my days vary quite a lot. So I'm probably on for maybe 15 hours. I'm not working that whole 15 hours, but I am available. I am, and I take long breaks. And I go to the gym for an hour or two, and I take these long breaks. But I have 5 hours each day that I time block out. Now the rest of that time will fit into that to do this, that want to do this, and I will take that scheduling on and say, well, actually, I want to schedule these things this week, and I think that's a really good way of doing it. So,
And Mayra, I'm glad you brought this up because and Greg, with what you just said, I love this part of the conversation because I'm always going to go back to because we all have things that work beautifully for us. They're not going to work for somebody else, for somebody else's energy, for someone else's personality. So I'm always going to take anything that gets talked about by any of us back to what works for you, and you have to be super clear. So like I used to be a time blocker. I am not a time blocker because that so does not work for me. I get so bored if I'm sitting there for these 2 hours doing this. My brain has to move differently. And so for example, time blocking works beautifully for you. It's not that either one of us is right or wrong, or that there's one good way to do it and a bad way to do it. It's we have got to get more clear on ourselves and go, if this doesn't work for me, that doesn't mean there's something wrong with me or I'm doing it wrong. It's that I'm actually doing it right for me. But oftentimes we all do this too. We get stuck in we all have to get up at 5 a.m., right? Because that's what successful people do. No, it's not. But there are enough books and articles and TED Talks out there about getting up at 5 a.m. and being successful. Again, that's not necessary for success. If you are not a morning person, please don't try and do that. You will feel like you're failing. And it has nothing to do with your success at all. So for a lot of people, getting up at 5 because they are morning people, they jump out of bed and they've got a couple hours to themselves where no phones are ringing, no emails are chiming in, nobody's up in the house. That's a beautiful time of day for that type of person. So, be careful about, and this is something I literally heard this on a podcast yesterday, and it's probably the most brilliant statement I've ever heard. The best advice I can give you is to stop taking so much advice. And, there are so many ways to do everything. The key is the right way to do it for you is the way that works for you. And if you don't explore different ways to do those things, you're never going to find what's right for you. And when you find what's right for you, it starts to be smooth sailing. It automatically starts to work. Your time all of a sudden opens up and feels better. Your overwhelm drops, right? Your confidence goes up. Your stress levels come down. But I love that came up because try different things and give them a chance. Don't try them for an hour and go, that's not working. Please don't do that. Don't do it once and then discount it. Pick a week and say, this week I'm going to work with this. I'm going to try this and do it for a week. No expectation, no judgment. Just become aware at the end of the week. Did that work for me or not? You might go, wow, I really like that. It's good. Keep doing it. Or you might go, whoa, that's not for me. And the key is you don't just ditch it. You go and find the next thing. What can I try next week? And see if that's the thing that works for me. Yeah. And I'll go back to something we talked about also that sort of goes hand in hand with this. The idea of time being finite or infinite. And, a lot of times you'll hear people say things like it takes 21 days or 28 days to create a habit or put a 90-day plan together. Here's the thing. Please throw all of that garbage out of your life forever. It takes the time it's going to take. The key is you've got to do it consistently to make it work or not. That's how you develop a habit. There's no other way. And the time's going to pass anyway. That's the point. You put it perfectly, Greg. The time is going to pass anyway. Who cares if my new habit takes me a day or a month or a year to create? A year from now, I'm exactly where I want to be. So don't get caught up in the advice. The best advice is go try things and find what works for you. Once you find what works for you, you don't have to keep looking. Go find something else that works for you. And all of a sudden, you've got a toolbox and a calendar full of things that work perfectly for you every single day.
Yeah, I was just going to bring, I look at these things as tools in the toolbox and you pick what is suitable for you at that time. So yeah, I've gone back to time blocking because there's some things that I want to do. So I've finally, after months and months and months, started writing a book. Now that kept on getting pushed back. So I've time blocked and said 3 times a week, I'm going to spend this amount of time writing. Now I started time blocking years ago and it didn't work. It just wasn't for me. So I left it and now I've gone back. The same with journaling, that I took so much advice on how to journal, how to get the most out of journaling. Pick your 3 positives of the day. Pick your 3 negatives of the day. Pick those 3 things that you want to improve. Or, and it never worked. I used to sit there and being quite a confident person myself and certainly having a positive mindset. I used to sit there and pick 3 negatives of the day. And I used to go, I don't think I had any negatives. And I'd say to people, they went, oh, but there must have things that have gone wrong. And I said, well, yes, naturally, but this is then what I did about it. So I'd see that as a positive because I had an obstacle and I thought my way around that obstacle. So that's not a negative. You know, there's things like this. So I actually stopped journaling because I was taking lots of advice. People were telling me lots of different ways to do it. Get a template for a journal, get this, get that, buy this journal because it's all set out, and write down your a quote of the day, write down this. And I tried this and it just didn't work. And in this period of years that I kept trying something, didn't work, put it down. Someone gave me some more advice. And you're right, the best advice you can have is stop taking advice. One day I got myself a new notebook and I said, I'm going to spend a little bit of time each day, not a set amount of time, but just to write down something. Whatever was in here that I felt like I needed to write down, I will write down. So like you, it was, my success is I am going to write something. It's not going to be emotions. It's not going to be thoughts. It's not going to be triggers. It's not going to be to-do lists. It's not going to be anything. It's just going to be something. And that has benefited me. And some days, I will sit and I'll write for half an hour. Some days I'll go, today was a good day. I can't tell you why.
Here's the book.
I can't tell you why. There's no significant event. I felt good today. Or I'm looking forward to tomorrow. Just that one line to say, yeah, today signed off. It's been a good day. And what you were saying, that, you set yourself up for success and saying, well, I'm going to do this. And it's one line. And to actually not take the advice of how it works for other people.
You can try it, but that doesn't mean that has to be what you do. Yeah,
you don't know whether it is right or not. And I talk to people about journaling and say, this is what I do. It might not work for you. You might need some more structure. You might need, especially if you're going through things like depression, anxiety, that kind of thing, you might need to keep track of your triggers. And actually then how can we avoid those triggers? And, so it has that use. But for me, it's a case of I'm just going to write something down and then I'm done. I'm happy. I'll close it. Yeah, like you say, close it up and get it all finished off. So that's it's fantastic. The one thing I was going to, sorry, did you want to?
Oh, I'm sorry. I keep. This is again. You and I could talk about this stuff for hours. I know, but we're on a time frame here. I think there's one thing to reiterate, Greg, that we've both kind of touched on a few different times, but I think the takeaways are really, one, you've got to know you. You've got to know yourself. Once you get more clear on knowing yourself and what works for you and doesn't, the world of opportunities to succeed open up. And that's a huge thing, but it's got to start with knowing you. The other thing is, regardless of whether you toss stuff on a calendar, a to-do list, whether you toss it on you time block or not, the common denominator is, if there is something you want to do, you have got to make time for it. You have got to make time for it, whatever that looks like for you. That's how you get stuff done.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It is making time, and sometimes you have to sacrifice things to do it. And people don't like the word sacrifice either, because they're having to give something up. But again, it goes back to the not to do list.
Right. And maybe we change the word sacrifice because that's that negative. Let's look at the other side. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create that time. Hey, here's something I don't need to do. Let me throw that out. Look, I just found an hour. It's right. It's sitting right there. It was there the whole time. Let me create it. Where can I take something out that doesn't matter as much? That time sitting right there. You're just using it in a way that might not be helpful to what you want to do.
Yeah. I think that's a good place to wrap it up, because we seem to have gone full circle for an hour, which is absolutely fantastic. I love when that happens, and you kind of realize you get to the end of an hour and everything just kind of links back to not only what you were talking all the way through, but actually right back to the start, where it's just a brilliant thing. So we've had some views on Facebook and some on YouTube as well, which has been fantastic. So I'd like to thank everyone who has joined in and participated. It's been so fantastic talking to you again, Robin.
You as well. Thank you for the invite, Greg.
Yeah, we'll push on next year, and I think this may be the last one we're having this year. I'm running out of days. Slightly ironic, I know, but never mind.
The days will be back next year too. It's all right.
They'll be back next year, yeah. So, yeah, thank you to everyone for listening, and thank you again, Robin, for such fantastic insights into confidence and how we can all improve our confidence, and yeah, take a look at ourselves and find out what you're seeking, which is great. So, yeah, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks, Greg. Take care.
Okay, bye.